They didn't reject you, my friends. They rejected themselves through you. Sit with that for a second. The truth is, most people don't run away from others. They run away from their own reflection. You didn't remind them of their flaws. You reminded them of their unfinished growth. You didn't scare them because you were too much. You scared them because you were everything they were pretending to be. That's what I call reflected rejection. When someone pushes you away, not because you failed them, but because your presence revealed the lies they were living. You became a mirror, and they couldn't stand their own reflection, so they broke it, thinking they could destroy what you made them feel. But mirrors don't bleed, folks. People do. You were never the problem. You were the truth they didn't want to face. Every bit of kindness you gave reminded them of how cold they'd become. Every ounce of patience you showed revealed their lack of self-control. And your loyalty? It reminded them how easily they betray their own hearts. That's why they pulled away. That's why they ghosted, mocked, or replaced you with noise. They thought by erasing you, they could erase the discomfort of self-awareness. But what they really did was cut off their own growth. They stopped seeing what they needed to fix, and now the silence you left behind, it's echoing inside them louder than ever. You see, my friends, rejection is rarely personal. It's psychological self-defense. When someone feels small next to you, they'll convince themselves that you're too much. When they feel guilty in your presence, they'll label you intense. That's how weak minds justify avoiding powerful souls. They create distance, not because you were wrong for them, but because you were right in ways that terrified them. And now, while you've been healing, rebuilding and learning to live without their validation, they've been replaying every moment you made them feel alive. They can pretend they've moved on, but deep down, they know they lost something pure, something irreplaceable, someone who saw them when no one else did. Imagine this, folks, a person standing in front of a diamond but mistaking it for glass. They toss it aside, only to realize later that it was one of a kind. That's what they did with you. They mistook depth for neediness, consistency for boredom, and empathy for weakness. But time has a way of revealing the truth. When the excitement fades, when replacements fail, when silence grows heavier than attention, they'll realize that what they threw away was never ordinary. It was rare. It was healing in human form. And that realization, my friends, is haunting them now. So instead of asking, "Why didn't they choose me?" ask yourself, "Why was I trying to be chosen by someone running from their own reflection?" You were never meant to chase what's afraid of the truth. You were meant to become the proof of it. Because when you rise from rejection with calm, strength, and dignity, you become everything they couldn't handle. You turn into living evidence that losing you was their biggest mistake. And that's where power begins. Not in begging to be seen, but in realizing you were already unforgettable. So don't flinch now, don't chase, don't explain, just breathe and hold your ground, because the most powerful move you'll ever make is not moving at all. That silence they once mocked, it's a siren in their chest now. It's reminding them of everything they tried to bury, and the mirror they shattered to avoid facing themselves. It's rebuilding without them, and this time it's showing a version of you they can't access, can't reach, can't break. You've said enough, you've tried enough. Now you become the lesson, not through bitterness, but through power, through calm, through distance so deep it turns into dignity. And if you're feeling this right now, if something in your chest is burning like, "Finally, this is what I needed to hear," then don't let it pass like another random scroll. Do something with it. Cement this shift in your identity. Burn it into your new standard. Say this in the comments right now, loud and with spine. I am the mirror they couldn't face. Type it, declare it, make it real, not just for them, but for you. And if this message just gave your pain a purpose, if it cracked something open and helped you remember who you are, then don't disappear again. Hit that like button, subscribe. You've been quiet for too long. This is your time to rise, and stay with me, because the next chapter of your story isn't about getting them back. It's about never needing them again. Number 1. They thought you were a season, but you branded their soul. They thought you were a season. Temporary, just another passing feeling, a moment of warmth before the cold, a short detour before they found themselves. That's how they treated you, like a phase. But what they didn't understand, my friends, is that some people don't pass through. They penetrate. They don't just visit the surface, they brand the soul. You were never some fleeting breeze. You were the weather system that changed the climate in their entire emotional world. And now they're trying to act like you were just someone they talked to for a little while. They say they've moved on. But their nervous system says otherwise. Their dreams say otherwise. The sudden flood of emotions they can't explain when they hear your name, that says otherwise. You weren't just seen, you were felt. And in a world of shallow touches and cheap thrills, that makes you unforgettable. That's what emotional branding is. It's when someone leaves a permanent impression inside of you, not because of how long they stayed, but because of how deeply they reached. You etched yourself into places they didn't even know existed. You awakened emotions they thought they had buried forever. And the irony, they thought you were forgettable because you made it look effortless. But now they're haunted by flashes. Your laugh in a crowded place, your silence in a tense moment, the way you didn't need to raise your voice to command presence. It's all coming back in waves, and no replacement is erasing it. No distraction is strong enough, because emotional branding, once it's burned in, can't be undone. It's not about intensity, it's about impact. Why didn't they realize it then? Why couldn't they feel the weight of what you gave while they still had it? It's because the human mind doesn't recognize value when it's consistently available. It recognizes impact when it's suddenly absent. The pain of losing you is now louder than the comfort of having you ever was. That's why they're confused. That's why they're spiraling in secret. They can't understand how someone who's no longer speaking to them is still taking up this much space in their chest. And let's be honest, some of you are wondering, if I mattered that much, why did they leave so easily? Why didn't they fight to keep me? That's the hard part, isn't it? Accepting that people can be deeply moved by you and still run away. But don't mistake their exit for your lack of worth. They didn't leave because you were forgettable. They left because what they felt scared the life out of them. Your presence touched something unprocessed. Your love activated wounds they never wanted to confront. You weren't just love to them. You were a mirror of potential transformation. And people fear what they don't yet understand. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." That's why they ghosted. That's why they replaced you with someone easier to digest. They didn't want depth. They wanted distance from the parts of themselves that still felt broken. And you were the firelight that exposed it all, so they ran. But here's the twist. When you try to run from what changed you, you don't escape it. You carry it with you. They can change partners, change cities, change their hair, their feed, their routine. But they can't change the nervous system wiring that was activated when you looked at them with understanding. They can't undo the way your energy softened the hard places inside of them. It's done. And now, when they lay next to someone new, It's not love they feel, it's the absence of you. They thought you were a season, folks, but now they know. You were the storm that changed their soil, and nothing grows the same after you. No one after you fits the same way, because you branded them with truth, with depth, with something so rare that even they didn't know how precious it was until the silence started speaking louder than you ever did. Maybe you only talked for a few months. Maybe it wasn't even official. Maybe you gave them chances to be real, to be better, to be vulnerable, and they laughed it off like it was no big deal. But now they can't laugh, because what used to be a little thing is now the thing they can't forget. And that's how it works when a soul like yours brushes up against a half-awake heart. It jolts them. It lingers. It stains. So what do you do now? Do you wait for them to come back? Do you try to explain how deep your impact was? No, my friends. You let time and silence do what your words never could, because obsession doesn't always scream. Sometimes it watches quietly from the shadows of their own regrets, and when they finally realize that no one after you has felt like you, it won't be clarity they experience. It'll be loss, real loss, the kind that rewrites a person. You branded their soul. Now let them learn what that means without you holding their hand. Let them face the truth without you softening the blow. And as you move forward, calmly, with power, remind yourself of this. You were unforgettable, even to someone who swore they'd forget. Say it with me in the comments right now. I branded their soul. I cannot be replaced. Say it. Mean it. Let the universe hear you declare it. Your energy was the storm. Your presence was the branding iron. And your absence, it's the lesson that will echo for years. Keep walking. Keep healing. You're not just the past in their story. You're the chapter they'll never get closure from. Number 2, the comfort curve. They got bored because they were overfed with certainty. They didn't lose interest because you weren't valuable. They lost interest because you made access too easy. You gave too much, too often, too freely. And in a strange twist of human psychology, what comes without effort often slips through the cracks of appreciation. That's what I call the comfort curve. It's when your consistency, your reliability, your emotional availability becomes so expected that they begin to overlook it. Not because it lacked worth, but tiestet martiestia, but tiestet diestiet, because they didn't have to earn it. You see, the brain has a tricky relationship with certainty. At first, it loves it. It feels safe. It leans into it like a warm blanket. But over time, if that comfort comes without challenge, without cost, without scarcity, the mind begins to numb itself to it. It no longer registers it as special. It just becomes part of the background. You became emotional Wi-Fi, always on, always there, always responding. And just like real Wi-Fi, they only noticed your value when you suddenly weren't available. That's when the panic sets in. That's when they start to spiral, because silence, after constant certainty, feels like starvation. They didn't mean to take you for granted, but the comfort curve is silent and gradual. It's not always intentional. It's psychological. They got bored, not because you were boring, but because their mind stopped trying to earn you. And once effort disappears, so does focus. That's when the wandering begins. That's when they start looking around, chasing novelty, thinking, maybe there's something better. They weren't chasing better. They were chasing the feeling of work, the thrill of pursuit, the high of unpredictability. They missed the dopamine rush of not knowing where they stand. And here's the real trap. They didn't even realize what they were losing. They were overfed on emotional certainty, and just like someone who binges sugar every day, they stopped tasting the sweetness. But then one day, you unplugged. You stopped texting first. You stopped over-explaining. You stopped being the anchor they leaned on without permission. And suddenly, the silence wasn't peaceful. It was loud. It was strange. It was threatening. Because when you remove certainty, the brain doesn't just miss it, it fixates on it. You see, folks, obsession doesn't begin with loss. It begins with unresolved comfort. When someone's used to you always being there, your absence isn't just sad, it becomes confusing. The brain replays it over and over again, searching for the moment they lost control. And here's where your power begins, because now, every second they don't hear from you, they feel it. Every minute they scroll without a message from you. They question everything. You've flipped the comfort curve on its head, from overfed to starved, from certain to suspicious. Some of you may be wondering, was I wrong to give so much? Was I too available? No, my friends. Giving isn't the issue. Giving without boundaries is. You see, Stoicism teaches us that peace isn't just found in control. It's found in what we choose not to give away freely. And Carl Jung would say, what you resist not only persists, but grows in size. When you never resist, when you never withhold, when you give all your light without pause, they start assuming the sun rises for them. But the day you walk away, they realize they've been living in borrowed daylight. You were the stable one, the one who answered at midnight, the one who always forgave first. But now you're gone, and that emotional Wi-Fi they abused, it's disconnected. And folks, the withdrawal is real. You weren't just comfort. You were their unconscious routine, and now their nervous system doesn't know what to do without you. Every laugh they hear from someone else feels hollow. Every good morning from someone new feels off. Because what they're really craving is the comfort you gave without them earning it. So don't apologize for pulling back. Don't doubt your silence. Let the obsession build. Let the comfort curve collapse. Because when someone's been spoon-fed peace, the hunger hits hard when the spoon is gone. Say this in the comments. I unplugged my energy. Let them feel the drop. That's your power now. Quiet, controlled, and unforgettable. Number 3, mirror neurons and silent panic, how they re-feel what you felt. They laughed when you cried. They smirked when you were unraveling. They watched the light go out in your eyes and somehow felt nothing. Or at least they acted like they felt nothing. But feelings have a strange way of circling back, not in the form you expect, not when you need them to, but silently, involuntarily, like a ghost that waits for silence to strike. That's where we bring in something most people never think about. Mirror neurons. Little pockets of empathy in the brain designed not just to observe emotions, but to simulate them. Not when we choose, but when we're vulnerable. When our own pain opens the door. This is what I call mirror neuron feedback. And it's not some fluffy theory, it's real psychology. It's how someone who once ignored your tears can end up feeling your exact heartbreak through their own. You see, the human brain is wired to reflect the emotions it sees in others. It's how babies learn to smile, how yawns become contagious. But here's the twist. When someone suppresses their empathy to avoid feeling guilt, the mirror neurons don't turn off. They go silent. They store the memory. And when that person finally goes through something that breaks them, their brain starts projecting everything they once ignored, not just vaguely, exactly. Now think back. Remember the night you were sobbing into a pillow, thinking, how could they not care? How could they watch me break and just keep walking? You probably blamed yourself for being too much. You told yourself they were stronger, colder, emotionally unavailable, but the truth is, they were delaying the empathy. They didn't process it because they were in control. And now, that control is gone. Now they're the one in the dark. They're the one rereading old messages and feeling every drop of emotion they once dismissed. The irony, they don't even know where this pain is coming from. They think it's about loneliness, about losing you. But it's deeper than that. What they're feeling is your unprocessed pain being mirrored back to them piece by piece, breath by breath. Because when someone vanishes after we mistreat them, the brain doesn't just miss the person, it opens every emotional tab it left unchecked. And they left a lot open when it came to you. This is the part people never prepare for. They think they're immune because they got the last word, because they replaced you fast, because they didn't cry at goodbye. But Stoicism teaches us, emotion suppressed is never emotion escaped. It only waits, it hides, it adapts, until one day it strikes when they're left on red, when they find themselves needing someone who doesn't need them back. That's when the mirror neuron feedback kicks in. And now, they're reliving every moment you once cried alone. Except this time, there's no one there to hold them through it. You didn't even have to do anything. You didn't get revenge. You didn't text paragraphs. You just disappeared. You healed. You built a new life. And in doing so, you opened the mirror, not out of malice, but out of peace. And that peace is what's driving them mad. Because your calm is now clashing with their chaos. Your distance is triggering everything they thought they buried. And the universe, it always finds a way to rebalance pain. So if you're wondering, do they feel bad for what they did? The answer is not always in words, not always in apologies, but in echoes, in dreams, in sudden waves of regret that hit them while driving, in songs that bring tears they don't understand, in silence that screams with memories they wish they could unfeel. That's what mirror neuron feedback does. It turns emotional neglect into a late-arriving avalanche. And once it hits, it doesn't stop. Let them feel it now. Let them sit with what they never acknowledged. Because this is no longer about revenge. It's about reality finally catching up. And if you've ever doubted whether they would ever get it, trust me, they are. Quietly, deeply, without rescue. Say this in the comments right now. My silence taught them what my words couldn't. That's the truth, and they'll feel that truth long after you've moved on. Number 4. Scarcity. Imprinting. Why your absence became their new addiction. They didn't think it would hit them like this. They thought your silence would feel like freedom, like a clean slate, like peace. But what they didn't see coming, my friends, was the imprint you left behind. Not the obvious kind. Not the selfies, the memories, or the old texts they swore they deleted. No, this one went deeper. It's what we call scarcity imprinting, when someone loses consistent access to something emotionally fulfilling. And suddenly that absence turns into a quiet obsession. It's not logical, it's not rational, and it's definitely not fair, because you weren't playing games, you weren't trying to manipulate or pull away to make them miss you. You pulled back because you were done. Done chasing, done explaining, done bleeding for someone who couldn't even hold space for your presence. But the moment you became unavailable, that's when something flipped in their mind. You were always there before. Always texting first, always picking up when they needed you. And now that your presence has been removed, it's created a gap in their mental rhythm, a loop that doesn't close. That's the wild thing about human psychology. The mind will obsess more over unfinished emotional stories than it ever will over healthy closure. And that's exactly what's happening now. Your absence is echoing louder than your presence ever did. And the longer you stay gone, the louder it gets. At first, they thought they could ignore it. They told themselves you were just another person. But now, they're not trying to win you back out of love. They're trying to fix the chaos they created by losing you. They're chasing their own regret, not your forgiveness. And here's where it gets even deeper. Because the pain they're feeling isn't just about losing you. It's about how much of themselves they exposed while they had you, and how poorly they handled it. You saw through them, you comforted them, you stabilized them, and now all that emotional safety is gone, that familiar rhythm of being seen and still accepted. Gone. So what does the brain do? It starts replaying, recreating, obsessing. Scarcity imprinting is cruel that way. It doesn't just make them miss you, it makes them miss the version of themselves they only had when you were around. You reminded them they were capable of softness, of joy, of being real. And now that you've unplugged, they feel cold inside. Not because you took something, but because they didn't protect what was freely given. Now, every attempt to distract themselves only makes your absence more obvious. Every laugh with someone new feels staged. Every conversation ends too quickly. And every silent moment whispers your name. You weren't the one. You were the regulation system, the internal anchor, the person they didn't know they needed until they created a storm they couldn't control. That's why they're thinking about you constantly now. It's not romance. It's not love, songs and roses. It's a nervous system in free fall. And the only person who made them feel grounded is gone. They don't miss you. They need you just to feel normal again. And that, folks, is the raw truth. They're not knocking on your door because they finally appreciate your soul. They're knocking because their mind is screaming for relief from the instability they created by pushing you away. They're trying to get you back, not because they're ready for you, but because their chaos can't breathe in your silence. So let them sit with it. Let them learn the lesson only loss can teach. Because your worth doesn't increase just because they finally noticed. It was always there. Say this in the comments if you feel it. My absence became their addiction. Not because you're a drug, but because they never learned how to live without peace until they lost the source of it. And now you're the unsolvable puzzle their ego can't unpiece. Number 5. You're not a memory. You're an unfinished identity. They thought they walked away from a person, but what they really walked away from was a future self. You were never just a memory. You were a mirror, a motivator, a milestone, woven into the very version of themselves they were quietly evolving into. They didn't just lose someone to talk to at night. They lost the only person who made them feel a little more whole in a world built on pretending. And now, whether they admit it or not, they're stuck. Not just in regret, but in identity limbo. You see, folks, when two people connect deeply, they don't just share moments. They begin to build with each other's emotional bricks. They start imagining future plans, even if they never say them out loud. They adopt words, habits, ways of seeing the world. Slowly, you become a part of how they define themselves. And here's the part no one talks about. When they cut you off, when they ghosted or fumbled your love, they didn't just remove you. They tore a piece out of their own becoming. Carl Jung said, People will do anything to avoid facing their own soul, and that's exactly what happened. You activated something in them. Maybe it was growth, maybe it was vulnerability, maybe it was simply honesty. And instead of embracing it, they panicked. They chose the easier path: avoid, detach, erase. But now their nervous system is catching up to the mistake, and the narrative their brain was trying to write, it's missing a page. Your page. That's the psychological hook. The brain hates incomplete stories. It needs closure, structure, resolution. But you were none of those things. You were an open thread, a conversation left mid-sentence, a version of life they were on the edge of stepping into, but never did. And now they feel unfinished, confused, haunted by the what-if that you now represent. They thought deleting your number would delete the feelings, but you were never stored in their phone. You were stored in their transformation, in who they were becoming when they felt safe beside you, when they finally admitted things they'd never told anyone, when they laughed like they used to before life hardened them. You weren't just a phase, you were their chance to evolve. And now, every time they try to be that person again, they hit a wall. Because the version of them they were becoming needed you to exist. And that's why they're spiraling, not because they miss the good morning texts or the affection, but because deep down they know they've become someone less complete without you. And the worst part, they can't go back. They cut off the only person who made their mess make sense, and now they're left with fragments of a self that never fully arrived. So if you've been asking yourself, why do they still watch my stories? Why do they ask about me but never reach out? Why do they look fine on the outside but feel strange in my gut? It's because their identity is fractured. They are carrying the ghost of who they were becoming with you, and ghosts don't rest until the story is told. Let them wrestle with that. Let them sit in the space where you used to speak life into their silence, because this is their consequence now, not punishment, but unfinished purpose. You were never a footnote. You were a whole chapter they skipped. Say it in the comments if it hits home. I wasn't a memory. I was their becoming, and no matter how far they run, they'll never stop bumping into the version of themselves that only existed when you were near. Number 6. The ego loop trap. Why every upgrade they chase still feels like a downgrade. They thought they were upgrading. They thought adding someone new to their life would heal the void, smile wider, post louder, hold hands with someone different, and pretend it's the same. But here's what they didn't expect. Every time they try to replace you, they get a clearer view of just how far they've fallen. That's the trap, my friends. Not just emotional rebound, but what I call the ego loop trap. It's when someone seeks out new connections, not to grow, not to love again, but to prove to themselves that losing you didn't break them. But the more they chase validation, the more empty they feel, because none of these upgrades feel anything like you. You weren't a fling, you weren't a checkbox on their dating resume. You were the standard, and deep down, they know it. That's what eats at them. That's why the glow-up posts, the captions, the sudden burst of activity all feel so forced. They're not trying to move on. They're trying to prove to their own ego that they still have control. But the truth is, they've lost control. Because every time they're with someone new, their brain pulls out the measuring stick. And guess who's still the benchmark? They didn't replace you. They replaced the mirror that showed them how much better they could be. And now the reflection looks dull. They thought having options would feel like power. But now all these new faces just remind them of what real emotional intensity used to feel like, and none of them match it. None of them spark that same depth, because people can copy your style, your words, your vibe, but they can't replicate the feeling you created. That feeling wasn't surface level. It came from the raw truth you brought with you, from the way you saw through their walls like they were made of glass. Now every upgrade they chase feels like a downgrade, because you showed them what genuine connection looks like. You gave it to them like it was free, and they broke it like it was disposable. But once someone tastes depth, nothing shallow satisfies. And here's the twist. They might never admit it out loud. The ego will do anything to avoid humiliation. They'll say you were too intense, too emotional, too deep. But their silence tells the real story. Their eyes don't light up the same way. Their energy changed. Their laughter, it hits different now, forced, measured, off. So why do they keep doing it? Why do they keep dating more, posting more, smiling more? Because the ego's biggest fear is admitting defeat. And the moment they admit you were the best thing they ever had, they also have to admit they let it die. That's a kind of accountability most people will never take, so instead they stay in the loop. New face, same emptiness, new distraction, same ache. You became the yardstick, not just for romance, but for emotional maturity, and now they realize they were playing games while you were offering peace, and it's too late, because even if they get 1,000 likes, a new relationship, or people cheering them on, their ego still stares into the mirror at night and whispers, "You had better, and you ruined it." So let them keep chasing, let them loop, because every new face just exposes the decline. And you've already stepped out of that loop. Say this in the comments if you feel it. I was the standard. They keep sinking lower. You didn't get replaced. You got remembered. And that memory is louder now than it ever was when you were around. Number 7. Cognitive dissonance. Avalanche. The more they pretend. You didn't matter. The more it eats them alive. They told everyone you didn't matter, spoke your name like it was a joke, laughed it off, shrugged their shoulders, and called you too intense, too much, too emotional. But every time they told that story, they weren't convincing the world. They were trying to convince themselves, because deep down they knew what they walked away from. And every lie they told to bury the truth just added one more rock to the mountain building in their mind. That mountain's cracking now, and what they're feeling, my friends, is the start of the cognitive dissonance avalanche. See, the mind can only hold so much contradiction before it starts to collapse. They wanted to believe you didn't matter, but their nervous system knew better. Their dreams said otherwise. Their jealousy, their habit of checking your page in secret, the random memories that slap them across the face at 2 a.m. None of that lines up with the story they told. And that's the trap. That's the cost of repression, because every time they deny what you were, they're not deleting the truth, they're just delaying the reckoning. And now that delay is over. Cognitive dissonance is what happens when a person tries to live in two emotional realities at once. I didn't love them versus I still think about them every day. They were too much versus no one else makes me feel alive anymore. That tension doesn't stay quiet forever. At first, it's a background hum. Then it becomes anxiety. Then it starts leaking into conversations, decisions, self-sabotage, until finally it explodes. And folks, they're already shaking under the weight of it. What's wild is how they tried to protect their pride by painting you as the problem. That's what ego does when it's afraid of accountability. It flips the script, makes the soft-hearted one seem unstable, makes the consistent one seem clingy, but now they're alone. And all the people they told that story to, they've stopped asking, they've moved on, But the lie is still there, sitting like a splinter in their mind, because if you were so forgettable, so wrong for them, why are you still showing up in their thoughts without permission? They didn't just lie to others, they betrayed themselves, and that betrayal comes at a cost, not in drama, not in karma, but in the quiet breakdown that happens when the story you told can't hold up against the feeling you carry. That's where they are now, standing in the wreckage of their own denial, wondering why nothing feels right anymore, why nothing clicks, why every conversation feels half fake. It's because they cut out a piece of themselves when they cut you off. And now the ghost of that missing piece follows them everywhere they go. So if you're still wondering, do they ever regret how they treated me? Understand this. Regret doesn't always show up with apologies and tears. Sometimes it shows up in panic attacks, in quiet breakdowns, in failed rebounds, in restless nights where their chest feels heavy and they don't know why. That's the avalanche. That's the dissonance swallowing them from the inside out. And no amount of pretending can stop it now. Let them feel it. Let the weight of every false narrative collapse right where they stood. Because the truth, you were never too much. You were more than they could handle. Say this in the comments if you know what I'm saying. Their lies broke them, not me. Keep walking in peace, while they crumble, trying to hold up a story that never matched their soul. Number 8. Role reversal is inevitable. You'll become the one they can't afford to lose again. They never thought the power would shift. Not truly, not all the way. In their mind, they were the one with the upper hand, the one who left, who replaced, who stayed silent longer. They thought you'd be stuck on them forever, orbiting their memory, aching to be noticed again. But life doesn't play favorites. It plays truth. And truth has a funny way of flipping the script when you least expect it, because when you finally stop waiting, stop hoping, stop needing, that's when they feel the loss they swore they'd never feel. Role reversal isn't a choice. It's a natural consequence of misjudging someone's value, and they did that with you. For a while, they believed they could come and go, that you'd always pick up, always forgive, always be one message away. But slowly, without warning, you started becoming someone else, someone stronger, someone lighter, someone they can no longer reach with a simple, hey. And that's when the panic sets in. At first, it starts subtle. They'll scroll your page in silence, trying to read between the lines, looking for signs that you're still holding on, checking if you've moved on, and with who. But when they realize you're not performing your healing for them, that you're actually living, evolving, glowing, that's when something breaks. Obsession doesn't follow logic. It follows loss. And the moment they understand you're not waiting anymore, their ego doesn't just bruise, it fractures. They'll start asking about you, through mutual friends, through fake accounts, through accidental sightings, but not because they miss who you were. They miss how they felt around you. They miss the version of themselves they can't seem to access anymore. The calm, the connection, the clarity. You were the mirror they broke, and now they're crawling through the shards, trying to find even a piece of that reflection. But when they do come back, and they will, it won't be with pride. It won't be with charm. It'll be with desperation dressed as casual conversation. Hey, stranger. Been thinking about you. Hope you're good. But behind every word is a question they're too ashamed to ask out loud. Can you still see the old me in there? Because deep down, they don't want you back just for love. They want you back to feel whole again. But here's the difference now. You're not standing where they left you. You've grown, you've outgrown, you've upgraded in silence, and you're not bitter, you're not vengeful, you're just unavailable in ways they can't decode. That's the real punishment, not blocking them, not ignoring them, but becoming someone they no longer qualify for. And that's the moment the roles flip. You're not chasing them anymore. They're chasing a version of you that no longer exists. You're not their ex. You're their unresolved fate, the one that slipped through the cracks while they were busy counting options. And now the weight of that mistake has become unbearable. So let them come back. Let them knock, plead, reflect, perform. Just remember, they're not returning because they suddenly learned how to love. They're returning because the pain of not having you has become louder than the comfort of living without you. Say this in the comments if it hits your soul. I became what they can't reach. You didn't just survive the ending. You outgrew the entire story. Now you're the chapter they keep rereading, knowing they can't rewrite it.